My name is Clay Downing. I'm the acting chair for the River Park Neighborhood Council. And we've got our guest speaker, Tim Flynn here. He's going to lead off once we get through roll and a couple of housekeeping items. So, first off, Neighborhood Council roll call just for the minutes. Clay Downing's here. Alana Stice. Here. Judy Breen. Here. Augustine.
Here.
Here. Caleb Broad, not here. Doreen Reed, not here. Right. So some housekeeping items for both of our speakers. Dale McAlpine, Officer McAlpine, is going to be here as well, but he's on a response and coming in, so he's going to be a little late. But some housekeeping. Please hold your questions towards the end of the presentation. So we know that something will pop in your head while they're talking, but please just wait. Other people probably have the same question. We want to make sure that our speakers can get through what they're talking about, answer questions related to that presentation, and then we can move on to the next thing and wrap it up. We're going to try and make it so we don't burn everyone's entire night here. So that's the idea. Our speakers, typically, especially Mr. Flynn, we're really happy that you could come with us today. We're focusing on a couple of topics. If you have time and there's anything off topic you want to talk about, you're welcome to. Thank you. But that's about it. So just let's make sure we can get through everything and have a good night. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
All right, thank you. Welcome to the River Park meeting, and I want to thank everybody for the invitation. It's probably about the 5th time I've spoken before the River Park neighborhood, and I already counted. There's 20 people here. That's a real healthy attendance, and I really want to thank your neighborhood chair for extending the invitation this evening. I try to make a regular round to all the neighborhood councils, and I'm just actually starting again for the new year. And what's really important is that you get information from obviously many different sources, but it's always good to hear from someone that serves on the city council, number one. Number two, I actively encourage you to get more involved. It's great that you attend neighborhood council meetings, but you know, we have a group of citizen advisory groups that are appointed by myself and then ratified by the city council. You might be interested in serving on one of these citizen advisory groups. Primary role, again, is to advise the city council on important issues. And the citizen advisory groups cover a lot of different areas like parks and recreation, community relations, the planning commission, which of course is a very, very important job, and the homeless commission, senior services commission. So I actively encourage each and every one of you to get more involved, and I will kind of cut to the chase when I mean that, because many of you perhaps are new to Oxnard. You might not be new to Ventura County, but you're new to Oxnard, and sometimes there's a feeling that River Park is not even really part of Oxnard, and maybe even the beach area. You know, the beach area is Channel Islands. This area is River Park. That's Oxnard. So we're all part of Oxnard, even though there are a lot of different neighborhoods and communities, and it's very important that we work together to be able to accomplish that. So when I spoke with Clay several weeks ago, we were having conversations about a variety of issues, and he was very interested in a couple topics. And there's one here that's even on your program that I'll mention to you. It might not be directly relevant to River Park because it's a newer community, but I'll go into that in a second. That's called Safe Homes and Safe Families. But one of the topics during election time, I go door to door. Some of you, I might have knocked on your door, and others maybe I haven't met you at your door. A lot of times there are a lot of questions that come up about schools. And it is kind of a unique situation being a mayor of a city that has basically really no jurisdiction over schools and what schools do, because schools operate completely separate from a city, even though cities have to cooperate and need to cooperate with schools and vice versa. I happen to be a full-time high school teacher. I fortunately took a sabbatical this last semester. That means I took a semester off, and I was supposed to learn Spanish. Well, I'm making progress, but I took a semester off so I could spend more time as mayor serving the people who have elected me full-time. Officially, being mayor of this city and most cities throughout the state of California, it's a part-time job. But Oxnard has officially 210,000 residents, probably unofficially closer to 230,000 residents, and it is definitely a full-time job. It's a 80 hour, if you're really doing it right, it's about an 80-hour-a-week job. So I try to balance both hats, and I have 2 teenage girls at home. One's leaving for college in the fall, and I'm trying to balance a lot of hats. So I'm here this past semester, or this past 6 months, serving you full-time as your elected mayor. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, again, is schools, and the question oftentimes comes up about schools, and people want to know what's going on citywide and what's the future hold for schools. Well, I work very closely with all of the school districts, or at least I attempt to. Sometimes I make statements about certain conditions that exist in schools, and it's not always received really well by school districts because they want only good news to come out, and I've been somewhat critical because I want to make sure that, you know, when River Park was developed as a community, right, it's a complete package. The residential neighborhood, the collection, right, which is more of an experience rather than just going to a store, and then of course the schools, and it's all one big package. All of you are paying, and I probably shouldn't mention this, you're paying Melrose taxes to support the infrastructure here. So there are 2 fire stations. One's run by the county, one by the city. That might change on the fire station for the county. They're doing some reorganization, and then of course there are all the schools, and that's part of this Melrose tax that you pay. So the question therefore is, if you're paying these taxes, people want to make sure that they're going to get their money's worth in the schools. And so one of the great things about the real school district is the superintendent. He really gets it, and he understands that here at River Park there is let's just say a very clear message that's been sent to the real school district that the schools here are going to be outstanding. And in fact, I'm a big supporter of magnet schools. Some of you might know, and you've heard of magnet schools. You've also heard of charter schools, and you've also heard of academies. And I wanted to tell you very quickly what the difference is between those, so you know when it's coming down the pike what you're going to get here at River Park. So a magnet school, largely speaking, is a school where there's usually a lottery, not always. And so there's a trend across the United States today that if a parent, or if there's a lottery system for a school, it makes that school better. And a lot of you might ask, well, how does that work? Or why would a lottery make a school better? Are the teachers better? Do they have better books? Is it a better facility? Well, the lottery, which is also inherent usually in a magnet school, because magnet schools, the whole school is an academic institution, highly achieving academic institution. Ventura has Foothill Tech, that's an example. It's in the upper 5% of high schools in the United States of America. Not Ventura County, not California, but the United States of America. That is a lottery program, and they have about 1,000 students. The school was built for 600 students, and it was built for 2 reasons. One, to accommodate the overflow from Ventura and Buena high schools, but also it was initially supposed to be a trade school. Well, it quickly evolved into an academic, high-tech high school. And what makes these magnet schools so unique is that the selection, or how the kids are selected, it's not the kids that are applying to get into those schools. Who's applying to get into those schools? The parents are getting. So what does that imply? That implies that parents are involved with their kids' education. And there's one thing I've learned 25 years as being a high school teacher. The #1 predictor of success in education, it's not about the books, it's not about the school, it's not about the principal, it's not about the teachers, it's about parental involvement. It doesn't mean that teachers don't make a difference. It doesn't mean that principals don't make a difference. It doesn't mean when you go to a nice brand new school that is not a morale lifter for teachers and for students. Those all have an effect on outcomes. So what's happening here at River Park is there is supposed to be, I thought initially it was going to be a junior high school, but my understanding is it's going to be a K through 8 school right here with the real school district. And that's great news because as mayor, and since I was elected as mayor in 2012, I have been speaking out very forcefully for the need for magnet schools on the Oxnard Plain. And the reason why is that the school scores don't get the highest scores, right? And so many parents, when they're shopping for schools, they want to make sure that the school scores on a 1 to 10 scale are 8s, 9s, and 10s. That's what parents want, 8s, 9s, and 10s. So if you get a 2Zs or a 3Zs or a 4Zs, you know, those are out, right? So the Oxnard Union High School District right now is looking to build a new school off of Rose Avenue, and that new school off of Rose Avenue is supposed to be half magnet school and half traditional high school. Right now, if the Oxnard Union High School District builds a brand new school, because of the overcrowding at all the other schools, immediately that school will be filled for 3,000 students. So we're hoping that, and I'm hoping that half of that school will actually be a magnet program. What's the goal? The goal should be that if you live in the city of Oxnard, that at least you have the opportunity to attend a magnet school from kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade, right? Let me talk about what's happening at many of the high schools and junior high schools outside of these magnet school concepts, and they're called academies. Academies are smaller learning environments in a traditional high school. They tend to yield great results. The problem is that if there's a student body population of 3,000, probably only up to 300, so only 10% of all the students in the school get into those magnet programs. The Oxnard Union High School District is investing very heavily in what's called linked learning. Linked learning is taking classes or courses and molding those courses into connecting students with the job market and with going to university. So how is this class directly related to you getting a job? All right. So those are academies, right? And then finally, as you know, in some instances, they're actually charter schools. And charter schools are actually public schools, but they operate through a charter outside of a school district. And there are several charter schools, even here in the city of Oxnard, they're in Camarillo, and they're in many other communities. What's the most important thing, and why am I talking about this? I'm talking about it because not only when I've gone door to door do parents have these interests, but it is directly linked to outcomes for students here in the city of Oxnard. And most importantly, Oxnard should be a place where someone's moving to Oxnard because of the schools, not avoiding Oxnard because of the schools, right? And unfortunately, all too often, the latter is more the case than the former, right? So I have a joke, right? I used to teach at Camarillo High School, so I know Camarillo quite well. Lived in Ventura for 5 or 6 years. I know, fairly well. I know Ventura and Camarillo, and my joke is Ventura and Camarillo are Oxnard suburbs, right? So too many people go to Oxnard suburbs simply because of the schools. But there's good news, not only because of what the school districts are doing, but they're also listening now, and they are much more open today to magnet schools. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because that topic does come up not only at neighborhood council meetings, but as I've gone door to door, it's actually what especially younger parents have hit me up with every single time I've knocked on that door. Hey, what's the scoop with the schools? All right. The next thing here on this program is something called Safe Homes and Safe Families, and I thought it actually would be a little bit relevant to the fact that one of the things that's happened here at River Park is with apartments is there's been a lot of overcrowding, and that's come to our attention on many different occasions. And this overcrowding has caused parking problems. If the parking problems weren't self-evident, or if they weren't affecting people probably wouldn't have a problem with people overcrowding in some of the apartments. Well, what we're trying to do citywide is launch a program. I have been on this since I was elected to the city council in 2004, and that is making sure that living conditions for people citywide, that they're safe, that people live in decent housing. So safe, decent housing. And although the overcrowding element is a far more complicated one, very, very complicated, very complex, I wanted to be able just to say that not only are we going to do this citywide, but here at River Park, the city council and the staff is very attentive to the fact, because parking problems have arisen from this overcrowding, and what we've been told is it's predominantly younger people, single, maybe more guys, and they're, you know, maybe they can't afford the rents. I understand some of the rents are really, really expensive, so they're you know, 2 and 3, you know, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people to a room, and that's really caused a lot of parking problems. So I want to let you know that, you know, the city council's been involved with this. We've had people come to city council meetings talking about the parking problems, and, you know, I want to compliment the police department and our development services department, our code enforcement department, because they're all, they have kind of a, and the beat officers, they have kind of a team approach to how to solve those problems. So those 2 issues, parking and schools, those are the most common issues that come up here at River Park. And yes, Melrose comes up a lot of times too, and I mentioned that in the context of the schools. So what I really wanted to do here this evening is talk a little bit about what is actually happening in your city. I want you to get maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I just want to talk about what's happening in the city so you're connected with what's happening. Number 1, you've read a lot of things in the paper about finances and the city's finances. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we hired a new city manager from the city of Modesto. His name is Greg Nyhoff. It's amazing to continue talking about him as a new city manager when he's been here 3 years. And what happened with Mr. Nyhoff is when he came, we knew that the city council knew that there were a lot of issues, and these issues were buried very deep. They were buried very deep, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But a lot of it had to do with the city's finances, all right? And so here's what I want to, how I can explain it. So the city, our budget that we just passed last night is somewhere like $412 million. $412 million. $125 million of that 412 are the basic services that are provided to you. Police, fire, libraries, recreation, parks. And I'm going to end with parks, by the way. All these departments are run from this $125 million budget. That's what our budget is, $125 million. So what happened is, within this general fund, there are like categories. And let's just say there are 300 different funds in that $125 million. Well, in many instances, these funds, they maintain reserves for a variety of purposes, right? Some are landscape maintenance districts, and parks and landscape maintenance districts are connected. In other instances, it might be for maybe capital improvements. So there are developer fees that go into these accounts, and then that money is spent on making improvements here throughout the city. Well, what happened, and what the council found out about a year to a year and a half after Mr. Nyhoff arrived, right, is that during the Great Recession, starting around 2007, 2008, all the way up until the time that Mr. Nyhoff arrived, because the city did not lay off employees, it did not cut its expenses, it basically drained those reserves, okay? And, believe it or not, the city council didn't know it. Might sound absolutely bizarre to you. Mayor Flynn, how is it that we elected you as our mayor and we elected a city council, and you know, an educated person, you've served long, why didn't you know that these fund balances have been drawn down to that level? Well, number one, whatever the information the finance staff gave to the auditors, you know, every city each year does a certified annual financial report. It's called a CAPR. That's an outside company that goes in and looks at the city's finances. It's kind of almost like paying a CPA to do your taxes. Yet they do the financial reporting for the city. So a succession of financial reports did not show these reserve funds having been drawn down. And so when Mr. Nyhoff came, one of the first things he did was they conducted a kind of an audit of all the operations of the city, and then they went into the finances, and once these audits, not one audit, but two audits, went in deep into the city's finances, it discovered that these funds were all dry. That there had been loans up to $5 million to our golf course that were never going to be able to be paid back. That the city's Measure O tax had to bail out the golf course for the tune of $5 million. That there were landscape maintenance districts where the costs for providing the services were exceeding the revenues that were being collected. You just can't arbitrarily raise the revenues for the landscape maintenance districts. And so what was happening is a combination of cruddy service on the one hand, and on the other hand, the reserves in those landscape maintenance districts were all being drawn down. And instead of straightening them out, okay, the funds were commingled so that there were deficits run by some districts and surpluses run by others. They just mixed it all together to keep it afloat. So one of the things that we've done over the last 2 years is I mean, it's taken an amazing amount of time, is unwind those landscape maintenance districts, and we're now just coming to the end. We've been working on this for a year and a half to unwind what was going on in these districts. But what's the bottom line? The City Council passed last night a budget, just over $400 million. And the reason why that budget is $400 million is because there are 3 utilities that are run by the city, and you get a bill each month for $150, $160 or so, and that's water, wastewater, and trash. What the City Council did after a review of these 3 independent utilities, the City Council went in and the city manager looked at our wastewater situation. We have a wastewater plant that was built about 5 years before I was born. I was born in 1959, okay? 5 years before I was born. And that wastewater plant, right, requires, as all wastewater plants, capital improvements and maintenance. Capital improvements are, you're replacing whole sections of the wastewater plant, right? Maintenance is just providing adequate maintenance so the equipment lasts longer, so you don't have to replace it, which are the capital improvements. This wastewater plant was left in the verge of imminent failure, and in fact it failed 2 to 3 times. I don't know if you know what happens to wastewater, but when you flush the toilet, it goes out to a facility that's out at the beach near the beach in Wainimi. The water, the wastewater, is treated and then it's discharged into the ocean. If raw sewage goes into the ocean, right, cities can be, and in the instance of Thousand Oaks this happened, fined tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, depending on how much discharge has gone into the ocean. So the bottom line is that we had to raise our wastewater rates. And that now is the subject of a great controversy, right? Because one gentleman was focused on the fact we should not raise these rates as high as we're going to raise these rates. Maybe we can negotiate with people, maybe we can find alternatives. And in fact, I worked with this individual on many different occasions to do exactly that. What kind of alternatives can the city come up with to deal with its wastewater plant? Bottom line is, you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. So if you have aging infrastructure, which we know has beset the whole country, right? You know, an initial assessment 2 years ago after a collapse of a bridge in the Midwest was there are 300,000 bridges in the United States of America that are not seismically safe. 300,000 bridges, right? We know that National Highway Safety or National Highway Administration formed under President Eisenhower. That system's about ready to go broke. So we know we have huge infrastructure problems all across the nation, but right here at home, it's our wastewater plant that needed repair. We needed to raise the rates. The bottom line is, the average bill will go up. What has already been raised and what will go up in 5 years, $22 per household. The initial increase was about $11 per household, and the increases over the next 5 years will be another $11 per household. That means $22 a year total in the 5 years and what's already been raised. So a lot of you might be wondering, well then what's all the fuss? what's all the fuss about wastewater? Well, I will just say, with trying to be fair to those individuals, there's a complete lack of understanding by the public at large about these types of issues. And unless you're studying them, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers, even as your mayor and as a member of the city council, but unless people really have their hands in this, and I'm not saying literally, I'm saying figuratively, unless you really have your hands in it, it's kind of hard to get your hands around it. But I'm here to tell you that we raised the wastewater rates after a second process. After a second process, it's called the Proposition 218 process. We went through all the hearings and the whole process, put together a citizens rate advisory panel. They came up with recommendations. The council adopted those recommendations. Your bottom line is the rates are going to go up over 5 years. The end result is about $22 per household, and that should get us through the wastewater plant for the next 15 years. That's an investment for the next 15 years. There are cost estimates that a completely new wastewater plant, of course we want to avoid this, but make responsible decisions, will cost up to $1 billion. Do you know what the total debt of the city of Oxnard is right now? About $550 million. So that would be, think about that. That would be 2 times more debt than what the city currently has just to build a new wastewater plant. Let me stop with wastewater. We have the same issue with water. We have the same issue with water. And as many of you know, because of the drought, and the first question is, Mr. Flynn, I thought it rained 22 inches in Oxnard this past year, and the average rainfall is 14. I thought the drought was over. I thought the governor said the drought was over. Yes, the governor said the drought was over because most of the reservoirs where we get imported water, they're filled. Remember Lake Oroville, and the dam was going to collapse and everything else? Here's what the problem is. Oxnard gets over half of its water by pumping water from underground. Those reservoirs underground, the aquifers, they are so overpumped primarily by farmers. I don't want to blame it all on farmers. Primarily by farmers, but also by cities that are pumping the water out. Why? Because that water costs about 1/3 or 1/5 the price of what it costs to import water through the California Water Project, right? The California Aqueduct. So what we do is we have blending stations all at various points throughout the city. We take groundwater and we take imported water, and in some instances we take surface water and we blend those. It's like a blending station. It's like a coffee machine. It blends the water, and that's the water that you get into your town, right? We, right now, are taking sewer water. We're taking sewer water, and we are producing 7,500 acre-feet a year. An acre-foot is what 2 families consume in a year. We are producing water, enough water for 15,000 families, but there's a catch on that. That water, it's being converted into water that's cleaner than the water that comes out of the tap, but the State Water Resources Board won't allow that water to go directly, once it's been purified. It won't allow it to go directly into your faucet. That we haven't come to that point yet of that crisis, right? Instead, we can only use it for landscaping, or we can sell it to farmers. And that's the story here with River Park. There's a recycled water line that comes all the way out here, and that recycled water is going to be used as irrigation for all of the landscaping here at River Park. And we're right now experimenting with putting that water into underground wells. It can stay there for 3 to 6 months, and then they can be drawn out again. Right? So Oxnard is ahead of other communities, but in order to do these things, it requires an investment. Right now, we have the capacity to do the 15,000, the equivalent of 15,000 homes a year. We want to go to 60,000. So we want to times it times 4. But in order to do that, it costs tens of millions of dollars. And what does it mean? It means that we have a reliable water supply indefinitely, because we're taking sewer water and we're converting it into the equivalent of drinking water. So we're getting now, we just raised water rates by 14%. We're going to start the 218 process. That's the state law that mandates this process of public involvement and time for public hearings and that kind of thing, so you just don't raise the rates and nobody knows what's going on. We're going to start that process in the fall, and we're going to take a look at water and what needs to be done with water, and it's likely water rates are going to go up in addition to the wastewater rates that have already been increased. And the last of the utilities is trash. Oxnard, about 25 years ago, invested in a trash recycling plant. It's called the Del Norte Transfer Station. And that Del Norte Transfer Station basically takes trash that's been separated, and then it takes actually the trash that hasn't been separated. That trash gets dumped onto a conveyor belt, and people literally have steel gloves on, and they pick out the recyclables in the trash. And whatever they can't pick out, it goes into big bins. It's then hauled off to 2 different landfills. We take, I believe, a third of our trash to the Simi Valley landfill, and we take another 2/3 of our trash to the Tolan landfill, which is in Santa Paula. Now the problem with landfills is they're getting all filled up. Their landfills are just about filled up, and there's not the space to create new landfills. So there's even more pressure on the state on us to divert trash from going into landfills, right? And that's more expensive to divert the trash. It just doesn't happen. Part of the problem is that we recycled so much that there's a glut on the market for recyclables. So China used to take everything from us, but there's such a glut on the market because of the efficacy of recycling that it drove prices way down. So that's caused an imbalance. The landfill dumping fees have increased. When gas prices went up, it cost more to actually dump that trash. And finally, the recycling center, right, needs, after 25 years, it needs to be refurbished. So we're going to be taking a look at that. Believe it or not, trash is in the best shape of those 3 utilities: water, wastewater, and trash. Right? So when you ask, $125 million is our basic budget, how do you get up to $400 million? Well, it's because of those 3 utilities. Those 3 utilities, that's how expensive it is, right, to run those 3 utilities. Huge, huge operations. What's the bottom line? The city is on a stable course right now with its finances. That is good news, because nobody wants a city to go bankrupt. A lot of people say, yeah, bankruptcy, that's a great idea. We'll get out of paying all those pensions. We'll get out of paying all that debt. We'll tell those people, you know, take a hike, buddy. We know you worked 30 years in the public sector, but we can't afford those pensions. So we're going to declare bankruptcy. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. And if you think it's a good idea, you look at San Bernardino and you look at those communities in California that declared bankruptcy. In some instances, they laid off 30 and 40% of their police departments, right? Disaster. Absolute disaster. Now, what happened most recently is had the city not raised its wastewater rates, it would have triggered dominoes that would have been the equivalent of a margin call. A margin call, we have these debt instruments that of borrowing money. One's a letter of credit, and another one is a derivative. And you do all of this borrowing, and you try to get better rates by doing this, but there are covenants that you agree to. Covenants are in bonds, in particular, but there are agreements. And in a bond, when you borrow money, our total debt for wastewater right now is $110 million. When you borrow that money, right, to protect the investors who invest in those bonds, right, you agree that you're going to keep your credit rating at a certain level. If your credit rating falls below that level, it starts triggering a series of events. Had the city not raised its wastewater rates, the city was already in default because we were not meeting our bond covenants. We were not collecting money at a rate, which is, by the way, 1.25%. For every dollar is spent, you have to collect $1.25. That 25 cents goes into a reserve account. Okay? We were not doing that. So we were in default. So Standard & Poor's went in and started lowering the city's wastewater bond. What would that have done had we been lowered 2 notches lower? It would have been junk bond status. It would have demanded, there would have been basically the equivalent of a margin call. The city was going to have to cough up $20 million. You know how much money we have in our rainy day fund, which is something that's a big thing for me? We have about $16 million in the rainy day fund. Wait a minute, they want $20 million. So when you take that $16 million and you put it into the wastewater fund because they've done a margin call on you, and then you got to borrow another $4 million to come up with the rest to get to the $20 million, guess what? Not only are you in deep dog doo-doo for your wastewater fund, and have they downgraded you to junk bond status, which makes it more expensive when you got to build the new plant and you got to improve the infrastructure. Now you're getting charged in some instances double the rates. So then it costs you more money. Now the general fund is in danger because there's no money in the piggy bank. And then those bonds then start getting downgraded, right? So when we raised our bonds, when we raised our wastewater rates, it was very key to prevent what could have very well been, not immediately, but maybe after a year or 2 years, bankruptcy for the city of Oxnard. The city is on a stable course today. And I attribute that not only to the difficult decisions that the city council has made, very difficult. Right now, there's a recall election. Some of you might not know that. I'm probably not smart mentioning. But the man who led Measure M to be on the ballot, with 72% of the Oxnard residents said, no, we don't want our wastewater rates to go up. I don't know why it wasn't 95%. I mean, somebody asked me, do you want your rates to go up? Of course not, right? He has decided, because the council actually did what we had to do, and I will stand here today before you and say, not just as mayor, but as a member of the council, we did the right thing. We did what we have. Recall or not, we did the right thing, right? But there's now a recall election to recall the 4 council members that supported the wastewater rate increase. And now we got to look at water, and now we have to look at trash. But the city is on a stable financial course. And that's what I really wanted to come here to talk to you about, because not only did some of you maybe not know about this prior to voting in the last election on the wastewater rate increase, the dominoes and all the things that were affected, you might not know that there is a recall signature gathering effort. I've been told it's right over here at Target, so that's what's happening. But I made my mind up when I ran for this position. A real good friend of mine said to me, he's a farmer, and he said to me, Tim, as long as you follow your conscience, you'll be fine. And not only am I following my conscience, but I believe my colleagues are. I did have one colleague that didn't vote for the wastewater rate increase, and he'll have to live with that decision. But we did the right thing. 4 of us voted for that wastewater rate increase, and we're now going to take a look at the other utilities. But we're moving in a very, very positive direction in the city of Oxnard. And that's where we've come from, and here's where we are today. So that's what I wanted to come and deliver that news to you, that the city is on a stable financial course. Some of you might have questions for me, like about anything. I don't care what it is, and I'm more than willing, if it's about the fountain, I can talk about the fountain. The fountain! God help us. The fountain, I just found out from the city manager's secretary, Lily Lopez. She also serves as my secretary, and I'm very grateful. I don't know how she does it. We're still on track to have that fountain up and running by the 1st of July.
Nice.
This July.
Next July?
Yeah.
Right.
This July? What are you talking, July 2020, right? But that's and that's our target date. But we're moving in a very positive direction, and it was after inquiries here from the neighborhood, and start making some more phone calls. Come on, we got to push it. It's a contract, and we got to get that. Come on, let's get the contract going. So the fountain's going to be up and running. That's good. Landscape maintenance districts are converting to contractors, which away from the city crews, because the city crews had been reduced, and that lowered the level of service. The LOS, level of service. It's so important. Whether it's the police department, right? Level of service. How quickly do they respond when you call? Same thing with the fire department. Everything we do is about a level of service, right? And you want the highest level of service for the money that you pay. So we're moving very positively on the landscape maintenance districts. I'm also asking, because the issue of the dog park has come up, that the dog park contract is coming to the council, I was told, before we go dark, which is in the month of August. We have a recess for 4 to 6 weeks. That contract will come to us. We're hoping that the contractor is going to start on the dog park in the fall. And that's what's going on with the dog park. Dog park, fountain, landscape maintenance districts, parking problems, schools, overall city finances. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So any questions?
Jim, you started off with making a comment that the reserves have been slowly draining nobody's purview. So this new guy used to come in, he's, I don't know, rattled the sword a little bit. Tell me why I should feel comfortable that we're in better shape now.
Well, we had a culture that had developed, and it was prevalent when I was first elected in 2004. I was not part of the council majority when I was elected in 2004. I kind of quickly went after some issues of just very important issues about whether it was open space or just transparency or honesty or whatever. And I quickly kind of ostracized. I was ostracized from the council majority. And so I wasn't on the end. I even had to sue the city manager to get information. I was on the city council and had to sue the city manager. So that culture, even though it takes a long time to drain the swamp, okay, that culture is no longer the culture of the city, because we've had hordes of people who actually served the city well and didn't do those things. They retired, but then a lot of people who were part of whatever it was, that culture that contributed to deception, that's the word, and I've alleged that there was a cover-up. Whether it was an orchestrated cover-up, I'm not a real big believer in conspiracy theories, but I believe there was a cover-up. That culture no longer exists. And it starts with not only the council, having a new council, but a CEO who's so honest that, I mean, if somebody accuses him of being dishonest, he gets a little tear in his eyes, all right? He comes from a very religiously conservative family from Kansas, and he is very, very principled, very, very honest. So I assure you that it's not that mistakes won't be made, because mistakes are made in government all the time. But we want to put in place, we want to make sure that there are checks and balances. And that's I'm a government teacher. There were very few checks and balances in our system, and there are arguably too few checks and balances in local government. We're putting in those checks and balances now and making those changes. But it's a cultural change.
And the reserves they've been replenished to a safe level, in your opinion?
Take the general fund, 15.2% right now. 15.2%, I believe, is what it is. And our goal is 18%. So another councilman and myself put a timeout on what's called augmentation, and that augmentation is spending money without. Well, we want to make sure our savings account is restored. This is my daughter. I have 2 teenagers. I'm sorry, Babe. I'm just ending my presentation. I'm just ending it, yes. Thank you. So, in any event, so to answer your questions, we want to get a plan to get to that 18%. So that's the general fund. And every one of those other funds start building up those reserves. So yes, I mean, and again, there are let's say there's 300 total accounts, right? I can't give you an accounting for every one of them, but I can tell you that the general fund is going to be our topic next week. So you might want to tune in on how the council plans on restoring that general fund piggy bank, that rainy day fund, between now and the next 5 years. So that will actually give you some very good information about reestablishing those reserves.
I understand it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
15 compared to 0 is pretty good number.
Right. And we have the city manager to thank for that. I mean, he took a lot of, you know what? Because we had some very, very tense negotiations with labor unions, who on the one hand were told like 2 or 3 years ago everything was peachy. Then the city manager came and they started doing audits and they go, oh my God, I mean, we were going into closed session every week saying, I'm sorry to tell you guys this, but, I'm sorry to tell you this, but, and the unions were saying, well, wait a minute here, is this a trick? Are you deceiving us? Are you using this as a tactic to play hard with us? And it wasn't, it was the truth. It was bad. So we borrowed $16 million from Measure O and we made $12 million in cuts. It was a $28 million reversal on at the time, $118 million budget. 28 million. 12 million in cuts, 16 million borrowed from Measure O, and we're paying that back every year. Yes? Yes?
Can we talk a little bit about some of the infrastructure that's going on? A lot of land being cleared and all that kind of stuff going on around here. Is it mostly housing?
On the corner, right when you get onto the freeway, those are going to be 2 hotels. Those were held up. I led the opposition to going forward because they were initially supposed to be 2 4-star hotels. The developer, Shea Properties, they did market research that suggested that the 4-star hotel was not going to be any longer sustainable because of the market and what's happening in the industry. And so we kind of held tough to say that we wanted them we wanted to hold the developers' feet to the fire to make sure that if they weren't going to deliver a 4-star hotel, they were going to deliver the very best 3-star hotel that they could. And now, I can't think of exactly what the name was. Maywood Suites. It's one of the top-ranked family hotels in the United States. That's going to be built there. And I know that on the other side of the hotel, there's a kind of a senior long-term care that's going to be built. And then across the freeway is Wagon Wheel. And Wagon Wheel is a 1,500 home development with 50,000 square feet of commercial retail that's going to be developed there. So those are in this area. Those are what the developments are.
And then over by the river there, that's a school, right?
Yes, it's going to be a school, and I don't know the name of that new proposed school, but built by the Rio School District, and that's the one I said is planned to be a magnet school. Yes.
Are residents within River Park going to have any priority getting into that magnet school, or is it a pure lottery system?
I don't know, but what normally happens is sometimes it's a 50-50 thing. So what they'll do is, and I'm not making these promises. I mean, I'm not part of the Rio School District, right, and or their decision-making process. But I would hope and I would think that maybe 50% is going to be geographic. The other 50% would be Rio School District wide, and people can get in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I work with the sheriff's department, law enforcement. I know these guys over here getting hammered. City officers with the law enforcement to the ground.
Okay.
Okay. What's being done to help these guys out?
Last night we restored 7. In the last 3 weeks, we've restored 9 of the total of, I think it was 21 positions that were cut. When you talk about them getting their butts kicked, every single department in the city, got their butts kicked, because those are the decisions we didn't make in 2007 that drained down those reserves. We had to massively cut back our budget, like I said, $12 million in cuts, borrowed $16 million, and last night, the very first augmentation, we held off on every future increase except for restoring 7 positions to the police department and 1 criminologist. So, and we're going back in that road. And let me say to you, and it's a very important fact, and you say you're a sheriff, right? I'm the sheriff's department. The city of Oxnard spends 66% of its general fund budget. 66% of that $125 million, and we have a thing called the Carmen override that gets added onto it, but that's a tax that you pay as a property tax. It pays for public safety retirement. We spend 66% of our general fund budget on public safety. We have a 3-to-1 ratio of spending for police over fire. The city of Ventura, most cities have a 2-to-1 ratio if you look at Ventura's police budget, and and their fire budget. They spend exactly double for police what they spend for fire. We're spending 3 times the amount for police that we spend for fire, and there's no city in Ventura County that's spending 66% of its general fund budget on public safety. And so our goal is to restore as many of those positions as possible, but the bottom line is this, right? If you know, anytime, we have extra money that's come in because of sales tax and property tax revenue. But anytime you know, if you don't have that extra money, or once you've spent that extra money, you got to cut from somewhere else. And I will tell you that every single department in that city was bare bones, including I get a half a secretary, I get a quarter of a person's time as mayor in a job that should be a full-time job. But I'm not gonna, I signed up for it. I voluntarily knew what I was getting into. But to give you an idea about how bare bones the operation is, I don't have a staff member working for me. I don't have an assistant. I don't have anybody answering the phones. I have a quarter of the city manager's secretary as the mayor of the city. And the city council members have nothing. They have no staff, you know, they have some support. They ask questions, they get answers, but that's just to let you know how bare bones the operation, and it's still not where it needs to be. So those augmentations that we're going to be restoring, we postponed all of them to first decide how much money goes into the piggy bank, except for public safety. 7 police department positions, 1 criminologist. 3 weeks ago, we restored 2 2 officer positions and 14 non-sworn positions in the police department. So the police department has been, as always, as public safety, it should be in every community. It's been our first priority.
A lot of times these guys, get 2 guys right in the wall, it's about to car and hurry in front.
We've replaced, right now, we've replaced, in the last year, we've replaced 1/3 of the fleet. Last year, in this last year, we've replaced 1/3 of the fleet. I can't tell you how much has come from River Park. I don't know. I mean, it's just like accounting on 300 different accounts. But we've replaced 1/3 of the total fleet. Yes. I got my daughter outside. You know what it's like to have teenagers. They're relentless, right? So I want to thank you guys. I'll come back again. Thank you for your time.